Hey there, future nurses. It's Kristine from Nurse in the Making, and today I'm going to talk to you all about my experience with my ABSN nursing program. I asked all of you on Instagram what questions about an ABSN program you had, so I'm going to be answering those in this video. First, let's talk about some thoughts people have about ABSN programs. So many students hear horror stories about an accelerated nursing programs and are scared to even do it, even though it's probably the best option for them. And it's honestly sad because so many students are deferred away from these ABSN programs because of these horror stories. So let's talk about them from somebody who had experience in an ABSN program. Before we dive into your questions, for those watching and may not know what is an accelerated program anyway, I'm going to tell you. An ABSN program is a condensed nursing program. You still get your Bachelor's of Science in Nursing. This way, you can sit for the NCLEX and become a registered nurse. The outcome is the same as a nursing student going through a 4-year nursing degree. ABSN programs are just doing that in a condensed time frame. There's one major requirement you need for an ABSN program, and this is a previous bachelor's degree. I did 4 years just like every other bachelor's student before I went into my ABSN program. And the reason I did this, and everyone's stories look different, but I got declined from a 4-year nursing program. And so then I kind of thought about becoming a dietitian, and honestly, it made sense for me just to finish a bachelor's rather than waiting an entire year to reapply for the 4-year nursing program. So I finished a bachelor's and then applied to an ABSN program the last few months of my undergrad. So back to the requirements though. You need a bachelor's degree like I said, but you also need some prerequisite courses. And this is because in this condensed ABSN program, you're not going to be doing these prerequisites. You're going to be taking nursing core classes. So you need to have these prerequisites before you even get into the program. These prerequisites that you'll need are A&P, like anatomy and physiology, statistics, biology, microbiology, psychology, nutrition, and chemistry. Lucky for me, I already took these because they were required for my Bachelor's of Nutrition degree, which was science focused. But maybe you're far removed from school and are in a current career looking for a transition into nursing. So the great thing about these prerequisites is they can be done at a community college and even online. I actually took microbiology online and sat doing labs and pouring little chemicals on my kitchen counters. Now that we have a little bit of a background, let's dive into your questions. Our first question comes from Law XO. She asked, where did you go for the accelerated program? So I went to the University of Tennessee, which is a pretty big state school and with a really big nursing program. I was actually surprised that I even got into this program because it is so competitive, but I was a CNA in my undergrad during my nutrition bachelor's, and this really gained me a lot of healthcare experience. So I think when I applied to this big program that I didn't think I was going to get into, having that bedside experience was really helpful for me. So I think that was what made me a strong applicant for that program. Question number 2 comes from Michelle, and she asked, would you recommend the program you went to? So I feel like with any program, you're going to have bad teachers, and with any program you're going to have some good teachers, and it's the same for clinical instructors, right? Like you might get a bad clinical instructor but also a really good clinical instructor. So I feel like that's really common for any nursing program. So if I would recommend it, I think that it's something to consider in the back of your mind, like, hey, no nursing program is going to be perfect. Something that you absolutely want to keep in the back of your mind is something called a completion rate. This is something you need to ask about when applying to your ABSN program. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about when I say completion rate. So for my program specifically, I think we started off with about 60 students and we ended up with like 35. So it was almost half. So our completion rate wasn't the best. Honestly, I think we lost a lot of students during our med-surg class because for my ABSN program, we had one med-surg class condensed into one term. Most traditional students have it into 2 different terms. They'll have med-surg 1, med-surg 2, maybe med-surg 1 and advanced med-surg, but we have it condensed. So this was really difficult for a lot of students. Difficult for me. I almost failed that class as well. So you want to be looking out at the completion rate. Something that I noticed, like listening to others talk about their programs, is that 12-month programs, I did a 12-month program, tend to have lower completion rates because it's even more condensed. So if you're nervous about this completion rate thing, start looking at the 18-month programs because they're a little bit more longer, you have more periods to learn things, and the completion rate tends to be higher in those programs. Question number 3 comes from Michelle again, and she asked, what was your undergrad degree in? So like I said, I had a bachelor's of nutrition from the Tennessee Tech University, and I really got this bachelor's because, like I said before, I was declined from the 4-year nursing program, so it made sense for me just to finish a bachelor's and then apply to an ABSN program instead of waiting an entire year to reapply for that program and might not even get in. So I applied to my ABSN program the last few months of my undergrad in nutrition. All right, the next question comes from Maggie, and she asked, how long did it take for you? So like I said, my program was 12 months. This was May 2019 to May 2020. Every school varies on how much time their ABSN program is. Like I said, mine was 12 months, but I also did apply to ABSN programs that were 18 months. So it really just varies based on the school. The next question comes from Shivansi Chand, and she says, how much did the program cost? As for the price, every school is different, and most schools have a breakdown of what their school costs on their website. You might just have to do a little bit of searching. So I was a resident of Tennessee at the time, thank goodness, because the cost of out-of-state tuition was almost doubled, as you can see in this picture here. So in-state tuition was $26,000, and out-of-state tuition was almost double at $54,000. So this is something you want to keep in mind when applying to these programs. If you're looking for out-of-state programs, you want to make sure it's not double the price, and something to keep in the back of your head, and maybe consider doing a program that's in your state. Don't let these prices scare you because, especially as a nursing student going into the field from a previous career, there are countless scholarships that you can apply to. So be sure to look at them. You might take a week and just say, hey, I'm going to apply to scholarships this week, and you'd be surprised on the amount that they're offering and the amount that you even can get. So don't let that number alarm you. If you're willing to do the work and apply for scholarships, it will help a lot. Our next question comes from Allie, and she asked, is it 10 out of 10 impossible, or is it doable if you're organized and motivated? So absolutely not impossible. Obviously, I graduated from the program, so it was possible for me to do it, and thousands of students graduate from these ABSN programs every single year. So it's absolutely doable if you're motivated, but I want to say something about that because I think a lot of students, for example, myself, went right into our 4-year undergrad straight into this ABSN program. I mean, yes, some people came from previous careers where they worked for a few years, but most of us came right from our undergrad. So I think a lot of students expected it to be like their undergrad, where you can kind of study the day before a test, you can kind of show up when you want to, or maybe you don't want to show up to class and you just stay home. That won't fly with these programs. These are full-time programs. They expect you to be at everything all of the time, on time, and even early. So if you're expecting this to be like undergrad and kind of float through, that's probably not going to work. But if you have the mindset like, okay, this is my life for the next 12 to 18 months. I'm going to have to make some sacrifices. I'm going to have to study sometimes when I don't want to. And it's going to be sometimes on my weekends, and I'm going to have to give up some things. If this is your mindset for the next 12 to 18 months in that program, you are going to make it as long as you're organized and motivated and you are with the right study group. And so I always tell students when they're like, I'm tired, I'm stressed, I'm like, this is such a short time in your life compared to an entire career, right? 1 year compared to 30, 40, 50 years of a nursing career. It's such a small time in your life. So it's absolutely doable and possible if you're organized and motivated. The next question comes from Steffi, and she asked, how intense was the program? I think that nursing school in general is very intense, but I guess I can talk about my experience. The first semester of my ABSN program was extremely hard. I didn't know how to manage time. I didn't study like I could in my undergrad. It was really different. I was finding what worked in my undergrad didn't work in this ABSN program. But the second semester was a lot better. I started to get into my study groove. And then the third semester, I was like a pro at managing my time, studying with purpose and focusing. I had a really strong study group at that time. And so I think you have to know that in the first semester, it might be really difficult, but you're going to get better, find your study group as you go along. So yes, it's intense, but possible. The next question comes from Jean, and she asked, how did you stay motivated? I'm in now and feel like I need a break. So you do get breaks in between each semester. They're like small breaks. So for me, I had a summer term, I had a break, and then I had a fall term, Christmas break, and then I had my spring term, and then I was done and I graduated. So you do get breaks. Like when I was going into the ABSN program, I literally thought we went from semester into semester, and that's kind of how these horror stories of what people tell you, but that's not true. They do give you breaks in between. But as for needing like a break in the middle of your semester, I think it's just important to take those little breaks. For example, me and my husband, like when I just needed a study break and I was like, I'm not retaining anything, I feel burnt out. We had the Smoky Mountains like an hour away from us. So we went there all the time on the weekends, just a quick little day trip. And I remember coming back from that feeling refreshed and motivated, and like we would talk about on our hikes, like our goals, and I'd just be like, all right, here we go, like I'm ready for this. So it's so important to step away sometimes. And I don't mean step away for like 5 days and take a break, but day trips or even like half day trips are really helpful to kind of step back and get re-motivated. But my other piece of advice is, like I said, sometimes you're going to have to power through when you are really tired. And like I said before, it's such a small part of your life compared to an entire nursing career. Question number 9 comes from Steffi, and she says, can you describe what a typical week was like? Some ABSN programs, the ones that are like 18 months, might have you start clinicals the second term. But for me, my program is 12 months. We dove right into clinicals in the first week. So I actually dove into my old files and found my program's calendar that they gave us. This way you can actually see what a nursing student from an ABSN program's week was actually like. So I'm gonna put screenshots of what our school gave us. So the first semester we had the weekends free. So you can see on Mondays, I had clinicals at the hospital from like 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. The first semester, I was with a clinical instructor. We was like a group of maybe 8 to 10 students going to the hospital, following our clinical instructor. It wasn't really so much shadowing a nurse until the second semester, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Tuesday, I had off, but you'll find very quickly in ABSN programs, there are really no such thing as off days because you have homework, you have tests to study for, you have assignments, you have care maps on top of a really busy schedule. So those days off, you really need to take advantage and plan your study time well. Wednesday, we had class that day. Also, it looks like I had an exam, patho class, then leadership class. Thursday, we had even more lectures and then lab right after that lecture. And then on Friday, we had another skills lab. So as you can see, it was a really busy week, but let me show you the second semester because it makes the first semester look really easy. For the second semester, we had clinicals on some of the weekends, not every weekends, but we rotated on different weekends. So we were either by ourselves with one other student, and we were with a nurse all day, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., shadowing that nurse. Sometimes it was like Saturday and Sunday, so it was really nice because you got to be with that nurse, see how they did it, but also know the patient. So like you got to see patients for 24 hours during that weekend and you really got to know them, and it was just like a really much better experience and learning experience than the first semester being with a clinical instructor, in my opinion. So let's look at a week from my second term. So Monday I had off, and of course parentheses because we had a lot to do. So if you can see on Wednesday I had an exam along with classes and clinicals. So Monday was my last day to really have a full day to study for that exam. Tuesday we had simulation lab, and this is where we did mock scenarios. So let me kind of explain what one of my simulations looked like. You basically went into a room with, usually it was with one other student, and there was like a camera where all your other cohort is watching you from another room. Sounds intimidating, and it was definitely horrifying walking into that room. So there was like fake mannequins, and our clinical instructors would have like microphones and be talking on behalf of the mannequins. These mannequins had like real pulses, real blood pressures, so you were literally acting like it's a person. They had bowel sounds, they have lung sounds. So basically you walk into this room, And you start talking to your patient, like you're gonna do an assessment, you're gonna ask them what's going on, you're gonna read their charts, see what medications they had, basically like real time where you walk into a patient's room. So I remember this one time I walked into this patient's room and he was saying how he was really dizzy and wasn't remembering things. And so we took his blood pressure and it was like really low. And you can see on the monitor, because it's like a continuous blood pressure cuff, it was like dropping really fast. And so eventually it went flatline and he didn't have a pulse anymore. So I remember like looking at the other student in the room and being like, okay, like this is where we do CPR. So like we're doing CPR on this mannequin while our entire other cohort is watching in the other room. And we do it, and then after the instructors come in and they tell us what we did right, what we did wrong. And it seems really horrifying, but honestly, these simulations taught me so much because I would much rather do CPR for the first time on a mannequin than on a real person. So simulations were really fun and really stressful at the same time, but somehow I still look forward to them even though the pressure of it was a lot. Okay, back to the schedule. So Thursday we had more classes. I had a med-surg test that day. Those exams were really difficult. Like I said, it was condensed into one term. Friday I had off, and Saturday and Sunday I had those 12-hour clinical shifts like I was talking about, being with the same nurse on the same floor. That semester I think I was in the cardiac step-down unit, which I really liked learning about the heart. I got to learn a lot that semester. So that's what a typical week from my first and second term of my ABSN program looked like. Next question comes from Bold Hannah, and she asked, do you recommend taking a break from work while completing your ABSN or still working through it? And I got a lot of questions like this. Kay Fields, Adriana, and Monica all asked, did I work while in school? So for my undergrad, like I said, in my bachelor's of nutrition, I worked part-time as a CNA, and that was absolutely doable. But when I got into my ABSN program, I didn't work. I remember like signing up for this program and we had to read a lot of papers, and there was like a disclaimer that basically said this is a full-time job. Like this is Monday sometimes till Sunday, full-time, you won't have any time. We were allowed to get jobs, but it was kind of looked down upon from our program coordinator. So let me tell you a story about one of our students who decided to get a job in the middle of the program. So I remember her being like, yeah, I got a job at like a restaurant, and we were all like, oh, okay. And she's like, yeah, I'm gonna work on the weekends, I don't have clinicals. And so we were all kind of like looking at each other like, oh my gosh, like that's gonna be really stressful. And 3 weeks went by and she quit because it was absolutely overwhelming for her, and she started like her grades started to drop, she couldn't get assignments done. And so honestly, sometimes it feels like you don't even have time to study, let alone work. So if you have a current career, right, let's say you're currently working in finance, you can start saving up for that ABSN program. That way you can pay for it down the road and cash flow it while you go into it. And like I said above about all those scholarships you can apply to, there are so many scholarships, especially for nurses right now in the day we live in. So honestly though, I would not suggest even attempting to work in this ABSN program. Definitely try to save up for it beforehand and look for those scholarships. The next question comes from Sincerely, and then Marzo asked kind of the same thing. So they asked, how did you manage your time and what ways did you find worked best for managing study time? This takes practice. Like I said before, the first semester is going to feel really overwhelming, but then the second and third semester, you're going to find your study groove. It's really like a trial and error, right? Some people can just read the book and memorize it. Some people need to write it all out. Some people need to write it on a whiteboard. Maybe some are flashcards. So really need to find your groove. And like I said before, what worked in undergrad might not work in this ABSN program. This is a different mindset. These questions are different. This material is way different than just A, B, C, or D. This is like critical thinking. So be sure to find your study group. As for managing my time, every professor in each class will give you a master calendar of their specific class, which is really helpful, but it's really important to have a major master calendar of all of those classes. So I literally remember after like the first week, I would have all my schedules from all my professors, and I would write in a master calendar every quiz, every test, every clinical, every lab, all in one place. That thing was like my life. And so it might seem like it's going to take a long time. It might take you 1 to 2 hours to write all that in, but it's going to be so worth it in the long run because it's out of your brain and onto the paper, and you know week by week what's happening. And so you could even like color code it, like med-surg be pink, pharm be purple. That way you can kind of see it all in one place. So let's say I saw that all afternoon I had off to study. So maybe my class ended at 11:30. I would literally write an hourly breakdown for the rest of the day of what I needed to do. So I'm going to show you an example of what that looks like in an actual calendar. So let's say from 11:30 to 12:30, I'm going to go for a run and then eat lunch, kind of like a quick refresher and remotivating after that probably really long class. From 12:30 to 1, I'm going to focus on pharmacology, only the antidepressant medications, taking one medication at a time. Then I would take a 15-minute quick refresher break. Then from 1:15 to 2, I would focus on pharmacology again, but only looking at antipsychotic medications. Then I would take maybe a longer break in between subjects, and the next time I'm going to focus on med-surg cardiac, so I'm going to review that. Then I would take another quick break and then maybe change up the study habit with doing NCLEX practice questions. This kind of gets you studying in a different groove than just reading papers. As you can see, during this time, I've taken a lot of breaks. It's really important not to just power through for 6 hours, to take those small 15 to 30-minute breaks, maybe going for a walk, baking something, getting a snack, getting some fresh air outside, whatever that is, to have to remotivate yourself to study again. Then let's say from 4:30 to 5:30, I took like 1 hour break. This is like a dinner/mental break. A lot of times my husband and I, we would make a quick dinner and then go drive somewhere and eat dinner. And then that way when I come back, I'm ready to go again. So from 5:30 to 6:30, I'm going to review all the pharmacology stuff I just went over. So I'm going to look over antidepressants, antipsychotics, do some practice questions, talk out loud on a whiteboard about it. And then from 6:30 to 7:30, I probably am not going to study and do maybe like an assignment, like a care map assignment. As you can see, it's really important to be organized and plan your study time down to the hour. You can grab the complete nursing school planner on my shop. It has a monthly overview, a weekly overview, and a fun weekly nursing school tip. It also has a test and assignment tracker. The link to this planner is in the description below. And the next question comes from Lindsay, and she asked, how did you take notes? This is like a great question, and I get this question all the time, and I really want to take my time with this question, so I'm actually going to make an entire video on how to take notes, so be sure to check out that video. The next question comes from Bold Hannah. She says, what was your best tool for studying and preparing for the program? So obviously I suggest the Nursing School Complete Bundle for preparing for the program. And this is like a great tool, honestly, because in these programs, everything is so fast paced and you might not have time to write these really pretty notes. And so it's done for you in the Complete Bundle. It takes these complex, hard, difficult topics that you don't have a lot of time to break apart, and it kind of breaks it apart for you into simpler terms. It has signs and symptoms, pathology, nursing interventions, and all that. So I think it would be a great tool for those starting a fast-paced nursing ABSN program, because like I said, you're not always going to have time to make them look really pretty. You can get this on my Etsy shop at NurseInTheMaking. The link is in the description below. I'll kind of show you a little bit of what it looks like on the inside. Another great study tool for me was my whiteboard. I loved this thing. So after I feel I was a little bit familiar with the concepts, I would write them out on a whiteboard without looking at my notes. The key point to this is saying it out loud. So like teaching somebody, it could be an imaginary person, it could be a real person, teaching it out loud, because when you say these things out loud, you hear yourself say it and you're going to memorize it way more than saying it in your head. The next question comes from Cassidy, and she says, is it harder to get A's? I feel like any nursing program, it's going to be hard to get A's. I mean, especially maybe even more in an ABSN program since it is so condensed. So honestly, unless you're looking to do like a master's program or become a nurse practitioner, your GPA is not really going to matter down the road. So for example, like in 5 years, let's say you're like reapplying for another job, they're not going to be looking at your GPA. They're going to look at your experience. They're going to look that you have a license number. So I always say this, that when you pass the NCLEX and you get a license number, there's no stamp on that license number that says your GPA. Yes, your resume says your GPA, but these hospitals want to know that you've had experience and that you have a license number to practice as a registered nurse. So I wouldn't be too hyper-focused on getting A's. I would be hyper-focused on knowing the information, getting so much experience in clinicals, and getting that license number, the thing that matters the most. Next question comes from C. Flurick, And he asked, if you could only tell someone one thing before they start their ABSN program, what would it be? I'm gonna cheat and say two things because I can't decide between them. So my first one is don't hang around complainers. A lot of times you get into a study group and it becomes one big session of complaining about how horrible your teacher was, how horrible the exam was, and how horrible your clinical instructor was. But the reality is you sitting around with the group complaining isn't going to help you get better grades or help you get a better experience at clinicals. So hang around with positive people who want to be there to study and learn the information. That would be my first big tip. My second tip is don't compare yourself. This is like such an easy trap, and I've been there so many times. Oftentimes I would compare myself to like someone else's study habits. I'm like, they can just read the book and memorize it. Like, I'm gonna try to do that. So I remember like opening my book and like trying to read it all, thinking like, this is not how I learn. So don't compare yourself to someone else's study habits. You gotta find your groove. Don't compare either. Somebody gets better grades than you, you might get really jealous of them, and it's just not helpful for anybody, right? Like I said, the goal is to pass, the goal is to get a license number. So don't entrap yourself with comparing yourself. Just be hyper-focused on doing your studying, doing your grades, getting good grades, going to clinicals. So that would be my second big piece of advice. The next question comes from Katie Swamp. She says, do those with ABSNs famously get paid less than BSN graduates? No. So let me tell you a big secret. When you graduate from an ABSN program, you take the same exact NCLEX as those with a 4-year bachelor's of nursing. So in the eyes of your state, let's say for me, I'm licensed in New York, you are just as licensed as a person with a 4-year bachelor's of degree. Like I said, you take the same NCLEX. So absolutely not. I've actually seen where ABSN students get jobs really quickly because we're hardworking people. It's not easy to go through these programs. Not everybody makes it through them, and it's really intense. So they want to have you on your team because you're motivated, know that you're going to push through really hard times. So I've seen personally that ABSN students get jobs really quickly. The next question comes from Tori. How much time did you give yourself to study for the NCLEX? I actually do an entire video about talking all about my NCLEX experience, what I used, how long I studied, and there's also like a free NCLEX study template that you can get, so a card should be popping up to that video. But great question. The next question and our last question comes from Soli. She said, just wanted to say I love this page. This is great for me in nursing school. Well, this isn't a question, but I really appreciate that. And I get so much feedback from my Instagram. If you're not following me along on my Instagram, you should, because I do daily nursing questions where I test your nursing knowledge every morning. I also do giveaways, like probably once a month, and I also do funny videos because we all need a laugh once in a while. So if you aren't following me on Instagram, you can find me at Kristine_NurseInTheMaking. You can also find that description below. Thanks for watching, and thanks for all of your questions. I hope this helped, and best of luck to all of you applying to ABSN programs. And if you like this video and want more nursing school help, different experiences that I went through, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.